and recite Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Welcome to everybody out there who's listening over the Zoom airways to the day 2 of this year-end retreat. And yesterday we were talking about some of the basic ideas about the Dhamma and the practice of Dhamma, and how the Buddha approached, his teaching of the Dhamma. And we're going to go a little bit more into that now. And so yesterday we learned that, the Buddha, he had an enlightenment experience, and then he tried to put it into words because that experience was so much beyond the normal language that he was thinking, how can I explain this that people are going to understand? So, he put it into that framework of the Four Noble Truths because everybody could understand what suffering is, because everyone suffers in one way or another. And then so, the Four Noble Truths was that the suffering exists, the cause of suffering, that suffering can be brought to an end, and then the way to live, think, and meditate, which will help to unravel the intricate, thorny web of karma that has accumulated in the unconscious mind for a long time. Now, coming back to the truth of the suffering, the Buddha defines suffering in 3 ways, where there's 3 levels of suffering. The first, he said that, birth, sickness, old age, and death is suffering. So this means the common kind of sufferings that occur because of this body. And the body, by its nature of being impermanent, is subject to the laws of impermanence and subject to, getting sick and aging and dying. And of course, people fear that because they have strong attachments. So basically, the physical, and also the fact that this body can be broken quite easily. You can get broken bones, and it can be, attacked by animals and, a lot of things. Of course, in those days, that was a real thing, being attacked by animals in India. Not here so much. But so anyway, that level of physical suffering. And then the Buddha went on to say, not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is suffering. And this is more of a mental. And this is more due to the dissatisfaction, that the mind is never satisfied. And it can't get what it always wants, so it gets frustrated, disappointed, dejected, depressed if it can't get what it wants. if it can't control its body and it can't control the situations around it so much, it suffers from not getting what it wants. And then getting what it doesn't want, because everybody has different ideas of what it wants, and sometimes they take it out on others. So, we're subject to verbal abuses, physical attacks from others, and unpleasant words, unpleasant sights and sounds, and the mind gets easily disturbed by things it doesn't like. So basically, the mind that's caught between satisfying its wants and desires and having fear and worry about getting the painful sensations and that may come to it. So it's always, in this fear of things going to happen to it and bringing pain to it or not getting what it wants. So this is a mental level of suffering. And then the Buddha said, in short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. He said, in short, because basically all those, the physical suffering and the mental suffering is bound up with these 5 aggregates of clinging. Now, this is a little bit difficult concept for a lot of people to understand, but the whole of the Buddha's teaching basically revolves around understanding what these 5 aggregates are and how we've allowed our self to get bound up with them, with strong attachments, identifications, and how they have come then to cause us a lot of suffering because of our mishandling of them. It's sort of like, if you have a snake and you grab a snake by its tail, you grab a snake by its tail, the head will come back and maybe bite you. So in the same way, if we don't understand what the 5 aggregates are and we use them improperly, they come back to bite us also. And hopefully, as we go along explaining these, it might be a little bit more clear. So basically, the 5 aggregate. An aggregate is a collection, right? So, that's what the English meaning is. It's a collection of things. So the 5 aggregates are the material forms. And I'll explain these in a minute, but material forms or the material objects, and then the feelings that these objects generate in us, and then the way we perceive these objects, and the way we think about them and react to them, and then our consciousness. So to keep it short, basically it's called form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. This is how these 5 aggregates are normally mentioned. But instead of, so basically all physical forms, that means our own body, your body, everybody's body, the cat's body, the dog's body, this earth with its trees and rocks and oceans and everything is made up of what is called the material qualities. And usually it's defined as being the earth element, water element, heat element, and air element. But just saying this, it's kind of vague, may not, people may not be able to understand that too much. Or they might think it's these elements that belong in the chemistry tables and so on, but it's also not that really. But actually it comes back more to physics. And I know there's some people who are, have studied physics and have PhDs in physics out there. And, but basically even physics now is saying that all matter is made up of energy, quantum physics, right? And And they've learned all atoms, all matter is made up of cells. Cells are made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms. Atoms have a number of electrons going around them, which is basically electricity. And then even those can be broken down more. So essentially what that is saying, that even physical matter, even solid rocks, basically in their essence is just energy that's been very, very tightly compacted and then appears as something solid, or it appears as something fluid. It has these qualities of being solid or fluid, having heat or temperature, and having air within it that allows us to move. So anyway, I know this might sound a little bit theoretical and hard to understand, but basically the collection, so all the different types of physical objects that we've ever experienced, like you see a man's body, a woman's body, a dog or a cat, and have all these things in your house. You're taking dishes and spoons and so on. All these things are hard. So these are physical forms that we have experienced. And so anyway, it just means this collection of physical forms. It means also the sense objects of anything we see, hear, taste, smell, touch, have these vibrations of these material vibrations. And that's what we experience through our senses. And then the next one is the feelings. Whatever we feel, so whatever's coming through our senses, basically that's a material vibration, a sound vibration coming through your ear. If you press your skin, you get a tactile vibration that goes through your nervous system to the brain, where it's recognized. And the same with a sound. It's a sound vibration or a visible vibration. You're seeing something. You have color or form coming to the eye. That's the form vibration. And it goes to the brain where you recognize it as being some object. We'll get to that in a minute, perception. And then the same with the odor and flavors. It's basically those vibrations that are coming through our senses are what is this material, this aggregate of material forms. And then as these vibrations are moving through the nervous system, we feel it, we sense it as this is something pleasant or it's something unpleasant. And that's based on our past experience, largely. But of course, like if you have a toothache, almost everybody unanimously says that's something unpleasant. But there's other more subtle things that different people experience in different ways. And we'll talk more about that later. And so after you feel the object, you perceive it. Or sometimes a perception comes first, but the third aggregate is perception. That means how the mind recognizes these vibrations. So you hear a sound, you can't see sound, right? It's just a sound that enters your ear, but yet the mind creates a mental object or idea that that's a cat meowing, even though you're not seeing the cat or hearing the dog or even your best friend shouting from another room. Just because of that sound has a particular quality, you recognize it as my friend or any other object. So that's a perception. It's the mental pictures or names or labels that the mind creates out of these vibrations because you've learned them from the past. Now, if you hear something that you've never ever heard before, then no mental picture comes in because you have no way of identifying that. So these perceptions are also conditioned. And then we react to that memory. We react to that object with either liking or disliking. We might try to go to the object to take a hold of it, or we might run away from the object or get away from the object if we don't like it. So how we react to the object. If we have an itch on our face, we might raise the hand and scratch an itch. So that is what is called the volitional activities, or the reactions, what I prefer to call the reactions, the way we react to these feelings and the perceptions. And then the fifth of the aggregate is the consciousness. That means it's our ability to recognize anything or to hear, experience anything is because of consciousness. Now, it's kind of difficult to explain, but it's the knowing faculty. And it's the sense of, right now you have the idea that you're somebody there listening to this talk or watching your screen. You have the sense of, I am doing that. So that is your consciousness. And usually it's connected with oneself. Every time we have consciousness, there's the idea that, I am the one, I am hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, or thinking. And so that's called the ego consciousness. But basically, it's basically like the light of the mind that allows you to see things. It's like a movie projector. If you have a roll of film, the old style movie rolls of film, and you run it through a projector with light, then you see the movie on the screen. But if you run the reel of film through a projector with a burned out light bulb, and there's no light shining, you're not going to see the movie. So, try to understand that consciousness is basically the light within the mind that's able to perceive these forms, feelings, perceptions, and the mental activity. So that's what consciousness, the objects of consciousness are form, feeling, perception, and the mental activities, because you can observe your thoughts and emotions and so on. So these are mental activities, which consciousness can also recognize. So anyway, I know this sounds a little complex for people who haven't heard it before, but try to bear with me a bit. So these five aggregates are what we take to be mine, or we identify as this is me, this is mine, or this is myself. Because we're always saying, this is my body, or give it to me. Or I am feeling this way. Maybe you're feeling sad. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling happy. I am seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. I am doing this. So we identify these aggregates as being somehow as ourself being the owner of them. And but the problem is, because these things are always changing, because we take them to be myself, when they change and we can't control them, then we suffer. Because it's the ego that's wanting all these things to be just so. We want to have good health, but then we can't help it. We get sick, right? How many people are getting COVID now? All the time. They don't want it, but it comes, right? Can't do much about it. And every other type of illness or problems that basically we can't really control the world. and unpleasant things will happen to you. Pleasant things will happen, but they're always changing. So anyway, the Buddha said that it's the attachment and the wrong understanding of these aggregates are what bring the suffering. And these 5 aggregates form the basis also of our meditation practice, especially the practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the insight meditation, which is the kind of meditation we're doing in this practice and in the retreat. So basically, the Buddha says, in short, it's these 5 aggregates of clinging that are bring the suffering. It's because we cling to them. But even if we don't cling to them, they still change, and we have to suffer somewhat because of them also. But it's the nature, because they're impermanent and they're constant. We can't control them, and there's nobody that can essentially control them. That's why the Buddha called them dukkha. So that's what the Buddha wanted us to understand. But unless you meditate, there's no way you can understand really the significance or the deeper meaning of why these 5 aggregates are called suffering. Now, some people don't like the term suffering. And so sometimes it's translated as unsatisfactoriness. So these 5 aggregates are unsatisfactory because they can't bring ultimate satisfaction. So they might bring temporary satisfaction, but then it's usually short-lived, and because that object changes or we change, we lose our interest in it, we become dissatisfied again. And then we need to have some other experiences. So we go on changing experiences and changing objects and so on, because the nature of they're constantly changing beyond our control. And it's the clinging, not wanting them to change, which brings the suffering. If you can accept it and allow things to change, then you may not suffer too much, but a lot of people can't accept that, or they blame others for their suffering when things change, and so on. So, the Buddhist teaching is a very deep, teaching. And that's why meditation is really the only way to understand it at a deeper level. Okay, now having kind of just outlined these 5 aggregates of clinging, I want to go in and to talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which are the Buddhist teachings on learning how to develop concentration, mindfulness, and insight. And the process of learning how to examine and understand how these aggregates have caused a lot of the suffering in our life. And so the 4 foundations of mindfulness is the path, the path that leads from the outside, to the inside. Because that's the way the Buddha also approached it. He saw a lot of suffering on the outside, or even within himself. And he asked, what is the cause of this suffering? And then by careful consideration and by paying attention and by, looking within, he realized it comes from the mind, basically. Most of the suffering, that means this dissatisfaction, and the suffering we experience is coming from within the mind, from our wrong views. So we have wrong views of the world, and thinking like this world was made for me, and we have the right to eat, drink, and be merry, and do whatever we want, and we should be able to do that. And this idea of freedom, and don't tell me what to do, and and then people go around doing harmful things to themselves and others. So this is a wrong view from the Buddhist point of view, because again, it's grasping the snake by its tail, and then that is going to turn around and bite you. So we have strong attachment to things. We get addicted to certain foods, for example, or of course, drugs, other things. We have fetishes, we have obsessions. People have all these different phobias and so on because of their wrong grasp, the wrong view of things, and having gotten wrongly enmeshed and entwined with them. So it's because of the wrong views, not understanding the reality, that we've allowed our mind to get all bound up in the law of karma. And basically we talked about that yesterday. So anyway, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, basically it's the practice of meditation. And so the Buddha approached this like a scientist. I like to say that the Buddha was one of the greatest scientists, or one of the original scientists, a scientist of the science of the mind. And so he approached the nature of suffering and approached life as a scientific process. He just didn't accept it that, oh, somebody created this world and earth and that's the way it is. Okay, fine. He wanted to investigate deeper. So just like a scientist wants to find out what's the cause of cancer, right? So the Buddha wanted to find out what's the cause of the deepest cancer, which is ignorance. And ignorance is sort of like a disease, the very deepest level of a disease. And ignorance is not understanding the truth. And it comes from our wrong views. So anyway, the Buddha was a scientist, and he regarded this body and mind as being the laboratory, or especially the body. So, because everything happens within this body. Another statement of the Buddha that I like very much was that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. And there's a little interesting story I like to tell from the time of the Buddha. There was one deva, like a celestial being, who can travel like 100 miles with each step. And this deva got up one morning and said, I want to find the end of the world. I'm looking for the end of the world. So he started walking, and then he started running to visit different enlightened sages and asking them, how do I find the world? Where can I reach the end of the world? And they would scratch their head and they would say, go ask the other guy, because they didn't know. And so he would go to the next one and get the same answer. Finally, after visiting 4 or 5 different these so-called enlightened persons, one of them said, you better go ask the Buddha, go ask the Buddha. He said, oh, okay, I'll go ask the Buddha. Or actually, this sage said, why don't you go ask the Mahabrahma, the God up in the world, who was supposedly made the world. So this deva, with his fantastic speed, he went up to the Brahma Loka and asked this Mahabrahma. The Mahabrahma was giving some talks to all of his disciples. And this Deva Rohitasa, he interrupts the Brahma and said, please, Mahabrahma, you created the world. How do I reach the end of the world? And this Mahabrahma said, shh, don't talk so loudly. I don't want my disciples to hear you. I don't know. You better go ask the Buddha. So this Mahabrahma, the God, is telling this David to go ask the Buddha how to reach the end of the world. And so Rohitasa says, well, I was already with the Buddha down there. Well, so he goes down and asks the Buddha, tells him what happened. And he said, my dear Rohitasa, you're not going to find the end of the world by physically traveling. And that's when he made this famous statement that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this body and mind. Because for the Buddha, the world is not this physical earth. It's not important. Or this solar system. The Buddha, it wasn't a matter how the solar system or earth came to be. But the world of suffering, how does the world appear in our mind? And how do we create our perceptions of the world? And, from moment to moment, our mind is basically creating our idea of this world and myself in this world. So when we look out and we see the outside world, actually, from the deepest level, our mind is creating a movie through these 5 aggregates: material, form, perception, feeling, volition, and the consciousness. This is all being generated within the mental process, moment by moment. And so basically the external world is a projection from our consciousness outside. Now, this is hard for people to understand, of course, and that's why you can't understand it without developing meditation. So anyway, that is how the Buddha approached this. So the Buddha took this body to be the laboratory. So he went in and he sat down and he crossed his legs and he started to meditate. And then, maybe in the beginning he didn't have a good posture and he was slouching. Then he realized, wow, I can't meditate slouching. I got to straighten up, and sit straight. Why do I have to sit straight? Because the mind operates through the nervous system. And if the nervous system is not in a straight, optimal position, those psychophysical energies and nervous system vibrations get impeded and don't flow properly. So the mind doesn't become clear, or it creates these hindrances of sleepiness or pain. So the Buddha saw that one has to keep the spine straight, and the head and spine in a straight line in order to remain awake and in order to have the maximum alertness of the nervous system. So that's why in the first part of the Satipatthana Sutta, the first instruction of the Buddha was to find a suitable place to sit, without too much distraction, and then sit cross-legged, because in those days everybody was used to sitting on the floor, so most everybody grew up sitting cross-legged on the floor, so it wasn't a problem for them. But nowadays, of course, many people cannot sit cross-legged on the floor, and they sit on chairs. But anyway, so to keep the back straight, and then setting up mindfulness in front. So the first foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of the body, so contemplating the body. And using the breathing for that. We went through that yesterday. So we use the breathing, which is part of the body process, as our initial object of concentration to bring our attention to the body. But then once we are able to keep our attention on or in the body for longer periods of time, then we make the body itself our object of our contemplation. And we sort of ask ourselves, what is this body made up of? Just as the Buddha did. Well, what I'm calling my body and bones and everything else, these are just basically cells, molecules, atoms, electrons, and basically just condensed energy. And it's just vibrations. All these things that I'm feeling coming through my senses is a vibration, and but we don't see the vibrations. If we hear something, we say, I'm hearing a voice. That's not a vibration, that's a perception. That's a memory. That's not the sound vibration. And if you're looking at here on the screen and seeing this face, you're recognizing me as maybe Bhante Rahula or a monk, but that's a mental idea in your mind. What you're seeing is just some color in a certain shape, that's all. It's only the mind through perception and memory that recreates this and then causes it to appear as some solid object. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm not existing, but the way your mind is perceiving it, this is how it's being projected in your mind. So this is important to understand because it's the basis for understanding illusion, how things, have an illusory aspect. We take something to be real, which is essentially not really. And again, it's mentally. It's not that it doesn't exist outside, but we live in our mind. That's all. We don't live outside. We live in our mind. And that's what's important to understand with the Dhamma, because it's the suffering that the Buddha was interested in overcoming, not the world. A lot of people think, oh, this world is evil, we better, get out of this world. Like maybe people who contemplate suicide, for example, or some other examples, but the world is not evil. It's our wrong understanding of the world that you could say causes us the problems. Now, of course, we can say conventionally there's a lot of evil and bad things in the world, but if we let our mind get obsessed by it, then we suffer a lot more. But anyway, so this using the body to investigate the body and the aggregate, the first aggregate of the material vibrations also. And so we're also contemplating this body. We understand that it's subject to sickness, disease, and death. And it was born from our past karma. The past karma and so on was one of the causes for this body then being produced, or our mind coming into this body. So anyway, we learned how to see that we're just a temporary inhabitant of this physical frame. So the mind is basically the person. The body is just a vehicle for the mind to operate through. And so somehow your parents, had some fun one night and produced a little, thing in, a little baby. And then this mind said, oh, there's a house, let me go there. And so the mind, the consciousness impregnated into that, in that new little fetus. And then it developed and then it was born, and that's where it's living. But it's just a manager. Just as you go into rent an apartment, we're sort of just renting this body temporarily because it has a lifespan. But we think we own it and we have to control it. A renter can't control his house, right? Really, I mean, he or a manager, we have to just manage the house. But earthquake come, it might fall down or it gets leaks and all kind of other things because that's the nature of it. So we don't really own it. We only try to manage it and keep it in good working order. But at some point we know we're going to have to let it go. So we don't get too attached to it. Just like somebody who's a renter, he doesn't get too attached to the house because he knows the landlord could throw him out, after some months. Or they don't pay their rent, they get evicted. So in the same way, we're only temporary inhabitants of this body, but the body is very important for our life. So we should treat it properly, and we should understand how it operates and try to minimize the amount of suffering that comes to it. So this is one of the proper attitudes of a meditator. So the mindfulness of the body is just that recognition that this is just the physical home for our mind, and it's our mind. This body is under the direction of the mind. If the mind is full of impurities, it can tell the body to do things that harm it. And if it's the mind is more purified or has more sort of moral principles and more developed, then it won't do things that cause so much harm to the body. So we have to live in this body. And it's where we experience the world. So through this body, we're experiencing the world as coming through our mind. And so that's why, but you have to get centered in the body to be able to see it. That's why becoming grounded and centered in the body is the first stage of meditation. And it's like turning up the power of a microscope. So the Buddha sat down in the meditation posture, sat down in the laboratory, and he looked down through the microscope. The microscope is concentrated awareness. So when you're sitting and you close your eyes, then the mind, the consciousness can feel and can feel different parts of the body and can feel your breathing. It can observe the breathing process. It can feel your heart beating, and it can basically move around and feel all the sensations in the body. And as you stay concentrated, it's like turning up the power of the microscope, and you can see more and more subtle vibrations. And it can be taken to such an extreme depth that you can actually experience the body as just a mass of amorphous vibrations. And the feeling of a solid body can actually vanish from the mind, because a feeling of a solid body is actually a perception that's being created in the mind. But through the meditation process and by developing deeper levels of concentration and mindfulness, you can short circuit the ordinary brain activity and reach deeper levels of awareness and consciousness. So that's a very important part of the meditation practice, is the development of deeper levels of concentration and mindfulness. But while you are feeling the body and centered in the body, then you feel all these vibrations coming through the body, and they have a feeling. So the second of these aggregates, once you've got established in the body aggregate, you've kind of detached from it and can sit for longer periods of time without pain or other distractions, then you begin to more clearly see these pleasant and painful sensations. So the aggregate of feelings are all the pleasant and painful sensations that we remembered our whole life from the different objects. So every vibration that comes through our senses, we've identified it as something I like or something I don't like. But this is something that has been conditioned, ever since we were a baby, as I gave that example yesterday. So we observe these in the meditation. Whenever a painful feeling comes into the body or the mind, we say, this is a painful feeling. How did this painful feeling arise? Well, because I've identified it as being this or that object. And in the past, I didn't like it. So now I must not like it either. And so the natural aversion arises. But you can say, well, I can decondition this, by not reacting to that aversion, not by feeding that aversion with more aversion, then you weaken that habit of aversion. And then the next time you experience that same object, the aversion might be a little less. And each time you're able to apply this mindfulness of the feeling to see its empty nature of just being a vibration, then and stop reacting to it, then you will have less and less aversion or irritation when these objects arise. And the same with the greed, because we can see the suffering that occurs by our mind being always harassed by these unpleasant or painful sensations. I mean, look, in meditation or, during the day, people are always going like this, and they're getting bugged and disturbed by so many little irritations. But most of them are not a big deal. Most of them, they're not life-threatening, they're not going to kill you, but yet people have no tolerance. They've built up a very small tolerance for unpleasant feelings. And it's not only physical feelings, it's also sounds. You hear an unpleasant sound, oh, I don't like that. Or you hear a pleasant sound, oh, I like that, oh, so nice. And same with the other senses. So the mind is caught in this tug of war between the pleasure and the painful sensations. And we strive to get a hold of pleasurable feeling and to push away the painful feeling. But as I already mentioned, it's basically a futile purpose because it will never happen because we can't control these sensations. So in the contemplation of feelings, which is the second foundation of mindfulness, and which is also the second of these aggregates, we learn to just first identify, okay, this is a painful feeling, or this is a pleasant feeling, but we understand this feeling is impermanent. And if you just wait for 5 or 10 seconds, that feeling is probably going to vanish. And we don't need to waste our energy scratching or getting upset or paying attention to useless things. We just have patience, and within a few seconds or more, those sensations are going to change and vanish. And the same way with these desires. This is just a mental recreation of these desires that keeps a person kind of, addicted to these pleasurable feelings, causing you untold problems. So we resist that lure or temptation to get attached to the pleasant feeling. And so in the meditation, whenever these pleasant or painful feelings come, because we've already developed our concentration to the breathing and using that as an anchor, our mind doesn't go after these pleasant or painful feelings so much. And therefore, the mind can remain centered and remain within its tranquility without unnecessarily getting excited about pleasurable feelings or getting bummed out by painful feelings. So that's the importance of this contemplation, the foundation of understanding what these feelings are. And the feelings are directly connected to the next one, which are called perceptions. Perceptions are the mental pictures that the mind creates based on the material vibrations and the feeling. They're all connected. They're all connected to the same sense object. And so we may have the idea, like you see a certain item of food, and maybe you didn't like that kind of food. And so every time you see it, you go, oh, I don't like that food. I don't want to eat that. But that's just a memory in our mind. And then because of this, our past experience, and that that unpleasant feeling is connected to this object, and that we don't want these objects to come. Now, usually at this point, I usually tell the story about something that happened in my own life when I was a young boy, that with avocados. It's my famous avocado story, but I'll just repeat it to be short. So when I was young, we lived near an avocado orchard in California. And my mother, being a good mother, she knew avocados were healthy. So she used to serve them with our dinner for maybe twice or 3 times a week during the season. And for some reason, I used to hate avocados. You know, it must have come from a past life or something, but I really didn't like avocados. And just the fact that my mother was saying, "Oh, we're having avocados tonight," it would send this chill up my spine. You know, so just thinking about the avocado gave me an unpleasant feeling, caused me to suffer. And then when she brought it to the table and put it down, and just seeing it, I had another negative reaction to it. And then when I brought it up and had to smell it, you know, sometimes I would kind of, you know, gag. And then sometimes when I actually put it in my mouth and started eating it, I would gag and once in a while even almost vomit. So I had this strong negative reaction to avocados, and I really thought avocados were evil. But my brother and my father and my mother, they loved avocados. They were just, you know, woofing them down. Here I was suffering. So that goes to show you that it's in the mind, because if avocados are essentially bad, then everybody would experience them that way. And that same thing goes on not only for avocados, but for everything else too that we see. But to finish the story though, later on in India, when I learned about meditation, as many years, you know, after that, then when hearing these teachings about the mind and so on, I said, I'm going to change my mind about avocados. And so I kind of bought some avocados, and I was forcing myself to eat them and mixing it with some other food, you know, first, and then just telling myself avocados are good, they're very healthy, and so on. And, you know, at first I would still kind of have a negative reaction, but I kept on reinforcing this idea that, you know, avocados are good and so on. And little by little, that negative reaction got less. And after a couple of weeks, I could start to, you know, not mix them with other food and just eat them by themselves. And I became to actually like them. So, you know, you can change your attitude about things that you previously didn't like, and then you can start liking them. So now everywhere I go, people hear this story, they always bring me avocados. But so anyway, that's just one experience, but it was a very good experience to show that really it's our mind that creates this idea of things are bad or things are even good. But you can change your attitude about them if you really want to. And that's, you know, through the practice of meditation and also training one's self, because it's really, this is what causes the most suffering in life, is this attachment and aversion to various sensory objects. And it's because of these feelings. Like you go into a museum, maybe people are looking at a famous Van Gogh painting. There's, you know, 2 men were looking at a Van Gogh painting, and one man is praising Van Gogh. Oh, what a, you know, he's the greatest painter in the world. And look at this painting, it's so nice. And a man standing next to him goes, ugh, you know, maybe uses some dirty language or calls Van Gogh a crummy painter. And they get into a fight, you know, right there over clinging to their opinions. But Actually, those opinions are just opinions, and they're empty of any absolute value. So that's an important thing to understand about the feelings, so that we can sort of neutralize our attachments or aversions to these things that are coming through us all the time. So that's how these, both the feelings that we have, pleasant and painful feelings, are connected with those perceptions, and then we react to those perceptions. But I'll be talking more about the volitional activities tomorrow. But basically, I just wanted today to, go into this process of meditation a little bit more. And that the reason why we use the mindfulness of the body is in order to get centered in the present moment, centered in the body, because that's where the nervous system is. And that's where we can more clearly see these vibrations and the feelings as they're entering the nervous system before they've already triggered off our reactions. So only by lowering our attention and being able to perceive these memories and vibrations coming up from the unconscious before they've triggered off our reactions, we can see them. Anger is arising now, or desire is arising now, and we can kind of put ourselves on guard of it. And then we can observe it as it's coming up, relax around it, apply the appropriate understanding to it, and hopefully not repeat our unmindful and repetitive habits. So this is just to kind of briefly the beginning of how we start deconditioning our mind, but it depends on first getting grounded and centered in the body, because that's where the world arises, that's where the mind operates, and developing this initial concentration. So that's why we use the breathing first, and we spend the first some minutes after feeling the body and establishing a good posture. Then we tune into the breathing more and focus on that for a certain period of time. It could be a few minutes, it could be 5 or 10 minutes, until you feel that relaxation arise in the mind. And then you can go on to develop that concentration to deeper levels, or you can start being aware of these feelings and other sensations as they start to come. So this is what I wanted to kind of share with you today, because this is a gradual process. Meditation isn't just something you sit down and you jump directly into the deepest levels of insight and things like that. No, it's a very, very gradual process because of the deep conditioning of these 5 aggregates. That's why it's good to have an intellectual understanding about them. And then when you sit to meditate, you then can apply that, reflect on that intellectual understanding. And then while you're observing these things happening, then it makes more sense. Okay. So as we did yesterday, we're going to take in this talk now, and we're going to take a short break. And for those who are listening in over Zoom, then also take a couple minutes if you need to use the restroom or drink some water, and then try to get a space. We're going to do a little standing meditation as we did yesterday, and a few stretches before sitting down for our sitting meditation. So try to clear a little space in front of your computer screen where you'd be able to see that as we're doing these exercises. Okay, so we'll see you back in a few minutes. Okay, friends, for those who are tuning in over the Zoom, we're going to start we'll just do some standing meditation first. So let's try to stand straight. Just gently close the eyes. Just focus your attention down to feel your feet pressing the floor. Feel the weight of the body pressing the feet on the floor. Just feel that hard contact with the feet to the floor. That's called the earth vibration, or the vibration of solidness. Anything that you feel that feels solid, it's called the earth element, or the earth vibration, one of those material vibrations. Just feel the straight legs over the feet. And feel your hands and arms hanging at the side. And feel the clothing touching the skin on different places. The clothing touching the skin, that's also the earth vibration. So when you feel that, you identify, oh, that's clothing touching the skin. It's a concept in the mind, but it's a real sensation occurring. And feel the head balanced on top. Try to feel your lips touching together. Feel the skin stretched over the face. Feel the eyes and the sockets, and the eyelids, over the eyeballs. All of those are also the material vibrations. But when you identify it as being different objects, that's the perception. From that point behind the eyes, try to open up the awareness a little. Try to feel the outline of the standing body. The general sense of the feet pressing the floor, the arms and hands, sides. The skin, head on top. Remember the present moment of standing, standing, standing. And then begin some deep, slow breathing. Try to take 3 seconds to expand the rib cage and upper chest. Bring the air all the way up into the upper chest. Hold the air in for 2 or 3 seconds and slowly breathe out. Just take several more deep, slow breaths like that, cultivating this mindfulness. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Now we're going to combine breathing, a few movements that we did yesterday. So on the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back, bend back a little bit, and stretch up at the same time. On the out breath, turn the palms down, touch the top of your head. And the second time, in breath, palms up, straighten the arms, stretch the head back, bend back a little. Out breath, touch the head. And third time, hold that upward stretch longer. And bend backwards a little bit more. Feel all the sensation. And release the fingers, The out breath, arms back to the side. Close the eyes, relax. Feel the tingling sensations in your palms and fingers. Subtle pulsations. Again, those pulsations are the material vibrations, being the blood pulsing in the arteries, causing these sensations. And the mind identifies those as my hand. That's a perception created in the mind out of just vibration. And just try to feel the outline of a standing body. Just remember standing, standing. Just letting go of your thoughts, keeping the mind grounded in the body. First stage of meditation. Okay, the next exercise, on the next in breath, push up on the toes while raising the arms up over the head in this way, facing the hands toward each other about 6 inches apart, and stretch up. The out breath, come back down. That breathing is the air vibration, and the movements that you're making is the air vibration. Again, in breath, use the breath to help lift the body up, like blowing up a helium balloon. The body raises up. Out. Once more, in. Out. Relax. Just close the eyes. Just rest the attention behind the eyes. Start to feel the outline of the body. Feel where the clothing touches the skin on different places. The other subtle vibration. Remember standing, standing, standing. Just let the thoughts come and go in the back of the awareness, keeping the sensation body, vibration body in the front of the awareness. Okay, next we're going to do side bending. So on an in breath, raise both arms up over the head. Keep the fingers and arms straight. On the out breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can, keeping the arms and hands parallel to each other like railroad tracks. In breath, lift up. And the next out breath to the other side. Feel the stretch in the side. In breath, up. Again to the right, out breath. In, out. In. Once more to each side, out breath. The out breath, lower the arms. Relax. Feel those subtle vibrations, especially in the hands and fingers. Feel the clothing touching the skin of the arm, chest. And let's do the head turning from right to left. On the in-breath, turn the head to the right. Look over your right shoulder. The out-breath, turn 180 degrees back to the left. Look over the left shoulder. In-breath to the right. Out-breath left. Once more to each side. On the in-breath, let the head stop in the middle. Feel the whole body. Start to feel the subtle vibration. Just remember standing, standing. Standing, present moment awareness. Just sort of try to imagine or think how what you're really feeling. This body is just billions of cells, and atoms and electrons, buzzing, vibrating, interacting, producing all these sensations that you then identify as being different body parts or my body. The idea of my body is something created within the consciousness, created within the mental process. Through vibration and memory. Okay, so now let's come back to our seats. Get ready for the sitting meditation. Okay, friends, so try to sit straight, get comfortable on your seat. Try to keep your back straight, head and spine in a straight line. Feel the natural inward curve of the lower spine. Feel the head balanced on top. Just gently close the eyes. From that point behind the eyes, try to feel that outline of the sitting body. It's like finding the laboratory, walking down the hallway, the university building, the science lab, finding the external body sitting, the door of the laboratory, and begin some deep, slow breathing like we were doing in the yoga exercise. 2 or 3 seconds to expand the abdomen, rib cage, and chest, holding the air in to feel the sensation. And on the out breath, those relaxing contractions of the out breath. Let's take several more deep, slow breaths, getting inside the laboratory. Feel those expanding and contracting sensations. Just cultivating this mindfulness. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Now we're going to count the breaths from 1 to 10. Try to develop a more continuous concentration. Get inside, sit down at the microscope, looking down to the microscope, looking inside the body, feel those expanding and contracting sensations. With the next in breath, mentally count to 1. Feel the brief pause. Contracting out breath, also count 1. Feel the last bit of air go out of the lung. The next in breath, 2. In breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In 5. Out 5. In 6. 6. In 7. Out 7. In 8. Out 8. In 9. Out 9. In 10. Out 10. Now discontinue the counting. Let the breathing return to its uncontrolled, shorter, irregular rhythm. But continue to feel it. Keep the attention focused in the center of the body. Feel those subtler, expanding and contracting sensations. Feel where the clothing rubs against the skin of the stomach, rib cage, or chest that expands and contracts. Just make that the primary focus. Concentrated awareness. Now you're inside the laboratory, looking down to the microscope. It's tuning in to the 4 phases of the breath cycle. The expanding in breath and the brief pause. The contracting out breath and the brief pause. Over and over and over again. Feel all those different little sensations. those material vibrations. So the air vibration, the air going in and out is the air element vibration. The clothing touching the skin is the material vibration, the earth vibration. Let's try to feel how each breath is different. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes the in breath is longer than the out breath, or the out breath is longer than the in breath. The pauses between the breaths may be longer or shorter. Maybe an easy breath, maybe a difficult breath. It's always changing. To help you stay focused, you can use these brief mental rememberings. In sitting, out, sitting. The ongoing, continuous connection to the present moment. This breathing body is the natural connection to the present moment awareness. In sitting, out, sitting, breath by breath, moment by moment. In the pauses between the breaths, feel the outline of the sitting body. Even while you're breathing in and out, you can also feel that outline of the body around the breathing. With other sensations coming and going. If you can, also you might feel the subtle heart beating behind the breathing. The heart is beating, sending out blood throughout the whole body. Breathing and heart beating, what keep this body alive. Feed and energize all the cells of the body. Just turn up the power of the mental microscope. Try to notice more and subtler, finer details, sensation in the breathing process or other sensations in the body. Prickling, itching sensations, pulsations, the touch of clothing. You can notice all these sensations along with the breathing. And be alert if some of these sensations are painful or irritating. Feel the mind get alerted for a painful feeling. Even painful feelings are just vibration. Just try to cultivate this idea that this body is just an aggregate of vibration, material vibration. That the idea of a solid body kind of fade away. See it as a sensation body. In sitting, out, out, sitting. Also just understand that, this body has a limited lifespan, subject to sickness, disease, and death. When the last breath goes out of the body, the heart stops beating. This body would start dying. Really just feel that vital process there in the center of the body, the breathing, heart beating. That is the real life, the real living. Start to feel that life force just percolating all throughout the body. Breathing is in the middle, but yet you can feel the sensations on your head, your feet, hands. That might be a pleasant sensation. There are also many pleasant sensations in the body, as well as unpleasant or painful sensations. but they come and go on their own. You cannot really control them. In sitting, out, out, sitting. Just with each out breath, just allowing the body and mind to relax more and more into the present moment, the here and now, that oneness with that life force. It's what it might have felt like when you were still in the womb, surrounded by all these life force vibrations. From time to time, especially if you might be feeling drowsy or too many thoughts, go back and take several deep, slow breaths to re-energize the bloodstream, help stay grounded, awake in the body. If you hear any sounds where you are, know that is just sound vibration. Another vibration, no different from the clothing touching your skin, it's just the vibration. If you think about it and turn it into some object, then the mind gets distracted, disturbed by it. Be alert with thoughts sneaking up into the mind. Just random, unnecessary thoughts. Just recognize it as just thinking, sort of watch the thought disappear, stay connected to the body. It's only when you lose the connection to the body, the mind gets lost in thought. Maintaining that connection, the body sensations, the thoughts might be there, but they won't last long, they'll vanish. The more sensations you can notice, the less time for thoughts to get stuck in the consciousness. Still be alert if any unpleasant sensations pull at the mind, some strong itches, or painful sensations. Just understand those sensations are basically just cells, atoms rubbing into each other, producing vibration. Painful sensations are just occurring within the larger sensation body. If you can, try to observe or identify those 5 aggregates. This is material form. This is pleasant or painful feeling. This is perception, mental picture or word. This is mental reaction, liking, disliking, moving. This is a thought of I, me, or mine, consciousness. It's a good practice to be able to identify those aggregates as they are arising. It's an impersonal phenomenon. Not me, not mine, not myself. Just accumulated and produced from past and present karma conditioning. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Material vibrations come and go. Pleasant and painful feelings come and go. Perceptions, mental activities come and go. Thoughts of I, me, and mine come and go. These are all just a continuous flow and flux of the 5 aggregates and their flow of impermanence. It's the rising and vanishing, coming and going through the space of present moment awareness. This is seeing through the eye of insight. If we lose that connection to the breathing body, and the mind gets attached to all these aggregates, gets pushed and pulled around. Caught up in worry, fear, anxiety. This breathing body is the lifeline, the life preserver, the anchor, the present moment. So the awareness can float on the waves of impermanence rather than getting sucked underneath into the whirlpool, conflicted thinking. Now, for those who are tuned in over the Zoom, can continue this meditation on your own at home. I'm going to sign out of this Zoom now. We'll see you tomorrow.